Welcome to the Human Flourishing Project. I'm your host, Alex Epstein. So we are a little over halfway through the first month of the year. Hopefully your year is going well. And I really hope, if you've listened to this show, that some of the episodes that I did, particularly around New Year and New Year's planning and goal setting and resolutions, have been helpful. They've been helpful to me, at least, and one of the pleasures of doing this show is just that I get to think a lot about flourishing, and particularly my own flourishing, and get to test things out, or after I speak about something that I already do, get better at doing it. And today what I want to talk about is something that I talked about in episode 8, which was on relaxed productivity. And it's a practice called time blocking, and in particular time blocking by category, that I've done for a long time for work and gotten a lot of good results there, but that in pursuing my goals in 2019, I've found, at least initially, is extremely helpful for every aspect of flourishing. So I thought I would share that with you and have you try it out as well if you want and see what kind of results you get. So just to remind you, the idea of time blocking is that you schedule actions in life, some kind of action, it's usually work for people, in a specific time-limited block. So we have this very commonly with meetings. I'm going to have this meeting and it starts here and it ends here. But people often find it very valuable not to just do that for meetings, but to do it for meetings with themselves for specific things. So somebody says, okay, I'm going to spend the first hour of this day as soon as I get up working on my book. And people find a lot of virtues in that. And one thing I talked about in relaxed productivity was that one thing that I think makes this a lot more powerful is if we apply time blocking to categories of work. So we have, let's say, I'm doing sales or I'm doing writing. Of course, your profession will vary, or I'm doing podcasts, or I'm talking to my employees. Just figuring out how much time do I want to spend on these activities, and then really taking that seriously and recognizing, okay, I only have a certain amount of life. I have 168 hours a week. How am I going to spend it? And if I don't think intentionally about how I'm going to divide time among these areas, I'm inevitably going to spend some time doing things I regret, and then not enough time doing things that I regret not doing. So this is something I've found works very well. But as I was planning this year and setting my goals for this year using some of the techniques I talked about a few episodes ago, and specifically thinking in terms of activities, companions, and foundations. So I'll elaborate on that. I'll re-elaborate on that in the context of explaining this, but just to keep the thought going. As I was thinking about that, I was noticing, oh wow, there are a lot of other areas of life that I don't have time blocked very well. I'll generally have time blocked, okay, I have one free day a week and then maybe one kind of planning day a week, but those are not time blocked very well. And thus there are all of these areas of life, all of these things that I would like to advance, that there's no clear time that they are actually going to happen. So I'll give you some examples. One of my goals this year recreationally is to start surfing, at least to give surfing a real try. And one of the preconditions to that is I want to get a lot better at swimming. I go in the ocean a lot, but I'm not a particularly good swimmer, and if I'm going to go surfing, I'd like to be better at swimming. And I know that there are some really good techniques for that, particularly this system called total immersion. But it's the kind of thing that I've heard about it for years and heard rave reviews of it, and it's the kind of thing I thought, oh yeah, I should do that, but then it never actually gets done. But if I look at the last year, in 2018, and you asked me, okay, if you could have spent 15 hours getting a bunch better at swimming, would that be better than some 15 hours you spent? Of course. Of course it would. I'm sure there are 100 hours that I spent last year that I would have rather learned total immersion, but just there wasn't a real plan for doing it. And what I find is with a lot of areas of flourishing, they can be advanced a lot in relatively small amounts of time, often small amounts of time with some sort of continuity over the year. But without those, nothing happens. So if you just take this swimming goal, it's just the kind of thing where it can be a goal or an aspiration year after year after year, but it doesn't ever really manifest itself in my life, and it doesn't ever manifest itself on my calendar. I'm going to look at my goals list. I apologize if you hear any kind of clicking. So if I look at some other goals, let's see, what else is another goal? Well, family-wise, I have someone in my family that I want to make sure that it's actually extended family, but I want to make sure that we visit monthly. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it happens, but it definitely doesn't happen monthly. And that's the kind of thing where that can be planned in advance. So what I was noticing is there are I can set a lot of goals this year, and a lot of them that would really improve my life don't take that much time, but they take some time. And then a specific example that came up on this show already, or two specific examples, are finding a doctor and then coming up with and executing a financial plan. Particularly the doctor thing isn't super time consuming, but it does take some time, and it takes time over time. So then I'm making these goals, and I have the question, when are these actually going to happen? And I thought, okay, well, let's do this time blocking by category, but let's look at it throughout all of life. Because really, there's no option. I'm going to spend my time in certain ways. Why not think through in general, how much time do I want to spend in different areas of life? And sometimes people find this constraining, but I find it liberating, particularly because I'm totally free to say, and I do say, hey, I'm just going to label some areas as totally free and whatever I want to do that week. So I'll just give you how I did this and see what fits for you. So the way I started was I just used a spreadsheet, Google Docs in my case, and I just wrote on the left-hand column, starting at 5 o'clock a.m., I just wrote by half hour, 5:30, and then I went all the way through to 4:30 the next morning. So I just had a 24-hour day, and then I put to the right Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then what I started doing was color coding or color keying. I'm not sure which one it is. Maybe it's both or neither. Different blocks, and then I would write text in the blocks to indicate what I would do within those. So, for example, I might say from 9 to 5 or from 10 to 6. That's a sleep block. I made mine a little bit longer. I gave 9 hours just as a kind of buffer. So I have from 9:30 to 6:30 is sleep. So I just colored that a light purple type of color. And then from 6:30 to 7:30 in the morning, I have as rejuvenation, and that includes when I wake up, but I do things like meditate and do a little bit of exercise and take a shower. So, okay, I have rejuvenation there, and that's a different color. And then throughout most of the day, I have different kinds of work, and then I have rejuvenation during the day. Now, Sunday is different and Saturday is different. I'll get to those in a minute. But if you care about my particular system, I currently divide up work in a broad sense into two categories. One is a baseline category and one is an upgrade category. So baseline is these are the things that I need to do with my current business to succeed. And then upgrades are these are new things that I'm trying out that may make my business better or may even create new businesses. But I like that distinction because otherwise I'll have a tendency not to do baseline things, and then that creates all sorts of issues. So for me, baseline is things like making sure I do speaking, making sure I fulfill consulting, making sure I do any podcasts that I'm committed to, making sure that I do any sales work that I'm necessary for, et cetera, et cetera. And R&D would be something like my new book. So, and this can have different subdivisions to it, but I think it's useful to think of it in a broad way, and then later you can go and you can say, okay, I want to spend this particular hour in this way. But I found this useful, and then I have from 1 to 2:30 every day. I have rejuvenation. I'm a big fan of rejuvenation. I think it contributes to a lot of positive things. So for me, that involves jujitsu and going in the ocean. Except it's raining like crazy right now, so the water gets polluted, unfortunately. So that's not happening right now. And meditation and whatnot. So that's, you can kind of imagine what that would look like. Then I start thinking about, okay, so those are the creative things. Then I start thinking about, what about recreation? So that's creation and rejuvenation. What about recreation? And broadly, I have two categories of recreation. One is what I would call a free block, or I could just put recreation, I guess. And it's a free block where that is, I can do whatever I want and I have no pre-existing commitment with any other human being. And so that's one. And then the other one is free with girlfriend. So this is this is time for recreation and fun of some sort, but it's I should say, it's with another person. So it's just the but is in the sense that it's that limits and in some ways expands the different things that I can do. So I need to get her general sign off before we decide if I want to say hang out with a certain friend and it's during that block, then of course we all need to sign off on it. Whereas if it's just my pure block, then I can do whatever I want during that block. And so I delegated different blocks for free, totally free versus free with girlfriend. And then so there's certain amounts of time during the weekend and then certain amounts of time in the evenings. And I found it very, very helpful to do this and to really think about, okay, what is my ideal amount of time with another person? What's my ideal amount of time where I just have total discretion over it, including I like a lot of time by myself? I found that very, very useful. And as I was setting these, I thought of, okay, well, what kinds of time am I going to need to achieve different goals? And I'm going to talk in a few minutes about how beneficial I found all of this, but I'll just finish the process because it's almost over. So those are some big categories. There's creation categories, rejuvenation, and recreation. But then there's another category which you could call a planning category or a strategy category. I call an altitude category because I like that term a lot, because I like the idea of a high-level perspective. And what I found when I was time blocking and reflecting was that I like a lot of time for altitude. And in particular, I might have mentioned I'm experimenting with having an hour from 5:30 to 6:30 every day where I take a walk and I take an altitude walk. And so far, I'm just finding that I realize so much stuff when I take that walk and talk out loud to myself and in the clever way I mentioned, where I just have my earphones in, so it's like I'm talking on the phone to somebody, but I'm really just consulting myself. I've found that really valuable. And then also, so that's one category. But then as I'm looking at my goals, I thought there's another category that would be tremendously valuable to block out, which is just for each area of life, spend, let's say, half an hour a week just getting altitude and making a little progress on that. So, for example, one of the categories is location/environment. And last Sunday, because this is where this is blocked off for me, I spent half an hour on that. And that was spent thinking about, okay, where do I want to live next year? Do I want to live in the same place? What are the pros and cons of that? What are the other different options? And I made a lot of progress on that. And I was able to start refining my thinking and then get in touch with people if I might potentially want to live in a certain area. And that's the kind of thing where in the past I would neglect that until it was a lot later, and I wouldn't make progress on that. Another one was the recreation area. Because I had an altitude block for that, for recreation, then I was able to spend a little bit of time doing research on swimming, and I found a swim coach who looks promising. I didn't reach out to him. I didn't get to that, but then this Sunday I can get to that. And similar kinds of things for physical health, mental health. I just found, I'm able to advance this quite a bit in just a little bit of time. Another one that came up a little earlier was I was thinking about environment, and I was thinking about the organization of my house. And my girlfriend's been watching that Marie Kondo KonMari thing on Netflix, and I've watched a little bit, and I'm familiar with her and generally a fan, although not the best practitioner. And I thought, okay, well, what would I like to improve in terms of the organization of my home and my own habits? And I spent 20 minutes or so thinking about what I would like to do. And one of the key ideas, now don't take anything from me on this because I'm not a model of it, but the key idea that really made sense to me was just to go through everything in the house and ask myself, when am I planning on using this in the future? And do I really want to use it in the future? And just asking that question, along with Marie Kondo has this question, does it spark joy, which I think is very useful. But if I ask, when am I actually going to use this in the future? I think it'll be tremendously valuable in eliminating things, but also figuring out where things go, because that question gives it context. And this is the kind of thing where it didn't take that much time. And because I have an assistant, he can help me a lot with this. But if I didn't take the small amount of time to do it, then it wouldn't have gotten advanced at all. So far what I'm noticing is that there are these big benefits of time blocking my whole life, or at least blocking out areas of time for each area of life, including times to just think about and reflect on and advance those areas. These are things that just, at least for me, will not happen automatically if I just say, okay, on Sundays in general, I'm going to be reflective and advance various things. It helps if I'm specific, and if I'm specific about the different dimensions of life that I think are important for me to flourish. So a couple of observations on what I like about this. And I want to share these observations in part because even if this method isn't for you, some of the benefits that I'm noticing from it are benefits that one should find somehow. So one big thing about time blocking that I really like is that it helps me recognize the precious nature of time. And this is something that's kind of obvious, but very hard to do. Time and life are weird things because by the nature of it, we only have experience having it. We don't have experience not having it because we don't remember before we're born, and after we die, I don't think there's anything. But whatever you think, it's not the same kind of experience. So it's just we have this limited amount of time alive on Earth, and it's very hard to have perspective on how precious that is. It's much easier to have perspective on something within life. Like sometimes people are pretty good. An athlete might be good at saying, okay, I've only got 10 good years. I'm going to enjoy those 10 good years. Or maybe if you've had an elderly relative who's near the end of his or her life and you really like the person, you have an idea of, okay, this is precious time. I remember with one of my grandfathers in particular, he and I had a very good relationship, and near the end of his life, I really liked how we interacted and spent time together. And I really had a sense that, okay, all of this time is precious and I'm going to conduct myself accordingly. And this included not getting in a whole bunch of political discussions with him because I was unfortunately unable to sway him, and I would rather discuss other things with him and enjoy his company in other ways. So it's by the nature, I think for a lot of good reasons, understandable reasons, it's easier to recognize the precious nature of specific types of time than of time in general, although in a sense, time in general is the most precious, irreplaceable thing. So one thing that time blocking does is by saying, okay, Alex, you've got this many free hours on your own a week, then I really am focused on, okay, those really matter. And when I'm spending those, I'm aware, okay, you only have this many. It's not infinite. It is limited because I'm limiting it. I'm limiting myself within life. And thus, in the aggregate, if I have this perspective with every area of life, it helps me appreciate the preciousness of life in general, because I think, okay, I've got this much time to do upgrade type work, and I've got this much time to do baseline type work. And, I can maybe change those, but in general, yeah, I have this much time with my girlfriend. And so I want to enjoy that as much as possible. And this much time to spend rejuvenating. So I really got to make the most out of that. And I don't find this pressure or stressing, really. I just find it as, okay, this really focuses me. So that's one big benefit, just recognizing the precious nature of time by being able to focus on blocks of time within life versus just focusing on life as a whole. Another benefit of time blocking by category throughout life, not just in work, is that it recognizes the value of every aspect of life. One of the ideas about flourishing is that it's an integrated state. It involves these different material and mental elements, or these really related material and mental elements, but it involves different types of activities of creation and recreation and rejuvenation, and lots of different things within that, including different kinds of companions for things. And it's not an obvious thing for one's scheduling of life to really respect and embrace the value of every different aspect of life. But by time blocking it, we're saying, how much time do I want to spend on this aspect? How much time do I want to spend on that aspect? And then, of course, recognizing that it's precious and optimizing it. So it's saying basically, okay, yes, in a certain sense, I need to, if I have a work commitment, I absolutely need to fulfill that. But in a very real sense, I have a commitment to myself to have a certain amount of recreation in my life. And I really need to fulfill that. I need to take that seriously. And I have a certain commitment to reflect on life and to have altitude and to plan a certain amount of time. That's just that. Think that it's rare that people respect or recognize the value of every aspect of life. And this kind of tool, this kind of the perspective, at least, that this time blocking brings me, and I'm sure brings others, is very good for this. So I'm sure there are other ways of doing it, but that is a value to think about. Another value is that time blocking in general encourages proper scoping and rescoping of activities. So scoping means, what is the scope of what I'm trying to do in a given amount of time? And when I say, okay, I've got half an hour to, say, give someone feedback on this book, I may want to give a certain amount of feedback, but then I may discover, okay, well, there's a certain aspect of this where I can be really helpful, and then there are other aspects where it would be great if I could be helpful, but I just don't want to commit that amount of time. So I'm going to scope or rescope what I'm doing to be limited to the most valuable use of time. And I find that with every area, the more that I scope, the more that I time limit things, the more I'm finding the most efficient way to spend the time, and the more I'm willing to limit the scope of something to get it done within the time, or I'm willing to take more time blocks over time. So maybe with my book, I have a pretty firm scope on how good I want it to be, and then I say, okay, well, then I'm willing to, if necessary, I'm willing to take more time on it to achieve that scope. But often it's okay, a certain scope is good enough. And there are certain there are equivalents of this with everything. If it's, okay, in half an hour, I have half an hour to do financial type planning, what can I really do in that half hour? And that tends to encourage me to spend it efficiently, versus if I just say, oh, I have all week to do financial planning. A, I might not get to it, but B, I might spend it a lot less efficiently. So let's see. What else? There are a couple of others that I wrote down. I'm seeing if any of these are particularly good or worth sharing. One thing is that, to the extent that we are connected to others, sharing this kind of time blocking can be very valuable, so that other people know priorities. And if you're in any kind of relationship, people just knowing, okay, this is where your time goes, and then also having, okay, this is the time we're going to spend together. Now, I'm going to say something now that in some way approximates ideas on relationships, which I don't think I'm particularly qualified to do. So I'll just say that. But I've shared this with other people, and it's been helpful to them, and it's been helpful to me. And I've seen people who have a lot more long-term relationship experience have success with it. And it's just that it's a good thing in general to have a limit, to not only have a minimum amount of time with somebody else, but a maximum amount of time or specific general amounts of time to commit. And this is where, if you want to criticize me, it's totally fine. But my observation about people is often people who are living together, their default is to not really think about what they want to do. It's just to say, okay, we're just going to spend time together. And then it often ends up that it's not that exciting, or because it's just the assumption is, okay, every spare moment we are together. And that doesn't make any sense. Everything should be limited. Everything has a right amount given a whole bunch of other context. And I think it's much better when people say, okay, how much time do we really want to spend together, and what do we want to spend it doing? And then that seems to be a really good way to relate to anybody, whether it's friends or romantic, versus just this idea of, okay, more is better, so let's default toward infinite. And then if I want to go do something on my own, then in some way that means something negative, versus saying in advance, okay, no, let's both agree this is a great amount of time to spend together, and then let's really think about how to enjoy that. And then this is amount of time that I want to do something totally different, maybe totally on my own. And certainly for work, I know that it works, just to say, okay, to people, okay, this is the time that I have where I need to really concentrate on my own, and then this is the time where I really want to help you, or I want to work on a project with you. And that just really aligns expectations and avoids a whole bunch of pitfalls. Let's see, a couple of other things. I sort of said this before, but one thing I really like about time blocking by category is that it encourages high leverage, non-obvious activities. What I find in all areas of life, but particularly the non-creative areas, maybe, is that maybe it's not that, but I'm noticing it with recreation and rejuvenation and also foundational type stuff like mental health, physical health, is that there are relatively brief things that I can do that will dramatically improve those, particularly if I do them on a regular basis. But because they're small amounts of time, because it's a relatively small amount of time to figure out swimming lessons and then to go to 10 of them or something, it doesn't lend itself well to it doesn't organically come up in the course of life. Whereas for me, writing comes up organically in the course of life because I do it a lot and I like it. So I'm almost certainly going to get writing done over time. But swim lessons I won't get done, even though there's a lot of leverage, unless I deliberately schedule it. In general, when we're just going with the flow, that has to mean a lot of just going with habits. And I think it's hard when doing that to really do justice to all the different areas of life. So I like the idea of, no, let's pre-plan a lot of areas of life where I can put a little effort, a little thinking into it, and then I can get a really big result. And it might just be half an hour a week, but that half an hour a week is going to make my whole life a lot better. And so that's why currently I'm liking the idea and the experience of spending half an hour a week on all these different areas, just thinking about how are they going, what can I do better, what can I do in this half hour to make those things better. And then the last thing maybe is just that it encourages time blocking. It encourages better integration and prioritization. Well, I guess there are two things: better integration among categories, and then better prioritization within categories. So the more I'm thinking about how much time goes here, how much time goes here, the way to really work those things out is to think about, how do I want my life to integrate? How do I want these different areas? How much time is a good balance of time, for lack of a better word, with these other things? What time amounts work really well for me, and what don't work very well to me? And it's this puzzle that there's a dynamism to the pieces, because they all have certain kinds of dependencies. But if I think about, okay, how much rejuvenation do I need? There's definitely a point where it's diminishing returns, but there's a point where an additional half hour is incredible returns. So I like just I'm blocking out all of these things and interrelating them, then I tend to integrate better my thinking about how all these fit together in life. And then because of what I mentioned before with time blocking, how it encourages efficiency, it encourages in any given half hour, it encourages efficiency. In general, it just encourages much better prioritization. So maybe, I forget what episode, but I talked about the playtime planner, which was thinking about how to use my recreational time better. I find it a lot easier to use the playtime planner when I have I've really scoped out clearly, I've time limited clearly, okay, this is going to be my different kinds of playtime. Then that really creates a focus of, okay, there are these 100 things you could do. You could go on these vacations and whatnot. Do you really want to do those? What do you really want to do? Because it's time limited, because it's not just, I have my whole life, but it's I have this many hours a week, and I expect to have this many hours a week in general. Or maybe I'll block it out so that I take a week off every quarter. But even that's very, very time limited. It really focuses the mind to recognize, hey, I'm not going to, given the way I want to live, I'm not going to be able to vacation. I don't really want to, I should say, vacation in all these exotic destinations. Leave aside the financial piece of it, but just that might be nice. But there are other things that I want to do more, and taking that seriously. And then I can really look at that playtime planner and say, okay, well, there are certain things I really want to make sure I do. For example, learn to surf, because I really love snowboarding and I love one-wheeling and I love the ocean. So it seems like a really good chance I would love surfing. But as I mentioned before, that's going to take a little bit of allocating time that I won't just allocate by habit. So my theme of today is the virtues of time-blocked living. And I'm really eager to hear what you think of that, and to the extent you try it throughout your life, what you think of it. There you can think of it on the level of how much time do I want to spend on different areas of life, and then you can also, if you want to be more aggressive, you can say, okay, I'm going to do this area at this time. I tend to like having the second one, where I not only have the length of time prescribed, but I have when I do it. There are a bunch of reasons of routine why I like that. I can see why other people wouldn't like that. But either way, it'll be really interesting to hear people's different experiences. So I welcome you sharing those on the Facebook page. That's facebook.com/Human Flourishing Project. You can email me at alex@alexepstein.com. And to get regular updates about this show, including just an announcement when it comes out every week, go to humanflourishingproject.com. That's all I have for this week. I hope that you enjoy the virtues of time-blocked living. I'll be back next week, but until then, I'm Alex Epstein. This has been the Human Flourishing Project.